In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where hope dies with the setting sun and miracles are just stories told around dying campfires, a group of elite Army Rangers found themselves trapped in what military strategists would later call an impossible situation. For 72 hours, they had been pinned down by enemy forces, their ammunition dwindling, their water running low, and their faith wearing thin. The radio crackled with static more than voices, and rescue seemed as distant as the stars above. They had heard whispers in base camp about a mysterious sniper who could make shots that defied physics and reason, shots that turned the tide of battle when all seemed lost. But legends don't answer distress calls, and myths don't pull triggers. Or so they thought, until the morning mist parted to reveal a lone figure with a rifle, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary miracles come in the most unexpected packages. The mission had started like countless others before it. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun adjusted his pack straps for the 100th time as the Humvee bounced along the rocky mountain path. The vehicle's armor plating did little to soften the brutal terrain, and each pothole sent a jarring reminder through his spine that comfort was a luxury in this part of the world. Beside him, Corporal David Rodriguez cleaned his rifle with the methodical precision of a man who had learned that his weapon was more reliable than luck, weather, or radio communications combined. "How much further to the drop point?" asked Private First Class Tyler Washington from the seat behind them. At 19, he was the youngest member of their six-man reconnaissance team, but his eagerness had earned him respect rather than mockery from the veterans. Washington had proven himself in 3 previous deployments, showing the kind of steady nerves that couldn't be taught in training manuals. Sergeant First Class Antonio Reeves consulted his GPS device and frowned at the small screen. "About 15 minutes if this trail doesn't get any worse." Reeves had been leading reconnaissance missions for 8 years, long enough to know that 15 minutes could stretch into hours when the mountains decided to be uncooperative. His weathered face showed the accumulated stress of too many patrols in hostile territory, but his voice remained steady and confident. Specialist James Morrison, their communications expert, tested his radio equipment one more time. The crackling static that emerged from the device was becoming frustratingly familiar. "Still getting interference from the mountains," he reported to the team. "Should clear up once we reach the observation post." Morrison's technical expertise had saved their lives on more than one occasion, turning malfunctioning equipment into reliable lifelines through pure skill and determination. The 6th member of their team, Corporal Sarah Kim, studied the topographical maps spread across her lap. As their medic and secondary sniper, she carried the dual responsibility of keeping the team healthy and providing long-range support when needed. Kim had grown up hunting in the mountains of Colorado, skills that translated perfectly to military reconnaissance work. Her calm demeanor under pressure had earned her the nickname Ice among her fellow Rangers. Their mission was straightforward on paper. Establish an observation post overlooking the valley below, monitor enemy movement patterns for 72 hours, and report back to headquarters with intelligence about insurgent supply routes. The valley had become increasingly important to enemy operations, serving as a corridor for moving weapons and fighters between strongholds. Recent satellite imagery showed increased activity, but commanders needed ground-level intelligence to plan effective countermeasures. The Humvee lurched to a stop at the designated drop point, a relatively flat area where a narrow trail branched off toward higher elevations. Driver Sergeant Mike Foster turned in his seat to address the team. "Pickup is scheduled for 0800 hours, 3 days from now, same location. Weather forecast looks clear, so we shouldn't have any problems with visibility." Foster had been driving supply and personnel runs in these mountains for 2 years, learning every dangerous curve and hidden obstacle along the way. Chun gathered his team around the vehicle for a final briefing before Foster departed. The morning air was crisp and thin at this altitude, requiring deeper breaths and more conscious effort for sustained activity. Remember, this is strictly observation and reporting. We're not looking for contact with enemy forces. Our job is to remain invisible and gather intelligence. He looked each team member in the eye as he spoke, ensuring his message was clearly understood. Rodriguez nodded and shouldered his pack, which contained specialized surveillance equipment along with standard field gear. How confident are we about the enemy's strength estimates? He asked, referring to the pre-mission intelligence briefings they had received back at base camp. The reports suggested moderate insurgent presence in the area, but experience had taught all of them that intelligence estimates were often incomplete or outdated. Intelligence suggests anywhere from 20 to 50 fighters operating in the valley, Reeves answered. But we've learned not to rely too heavily on those numbers. We'll know more once we get eyes on the target area. His caution was well-founded, as previous missions had encountered enemy forces that significantly exceeded intelligence estimates. The team moved out along the narrow trail, maintaining proper spacing and communication protocols as they climbed toward their designated observation post. The path wound upward through rocky terrain dotted with sparse vegetation and occasional clusters of stunted trees. Each step required careful attention to avoid loose stones that could create noise or cause injury. Morrison monitored radio frequencies as they climbed, listening for any chatter that might indicate enemy awareness of their presence. The mountains played havoc with radio signals, creating dead zones and areas of interference that could leave teams isolated from command support. Still getting that interference, he reported quietly to Chun. Might be atmospheric, might be jamming equipment. Hard to tell from here. After 2 hours of steady climbing, they reached their designated observation post, a cluster of large boulders that provided both concealment and excellent visibility over the valley below. Kim immediately began setting up their communications equipment while Washington and Rodriguez established security positions with clear fields of view in multiple directions. The valley spread out beneath them like a detailed map, with a river running through its center and several small villages scattered along its banks. Through binoculars, they could see the main road that intelligence had identified as a primary supply route, along with several smaller paths that connected the villages to surrounding mountains. Perfect visibility, Reeves observed as he studied the terrain through his scope. We'll be able to monitor everything that moves down there. The elevation gave them a commanding view of enemy activity while keeping them well concealed from observation from below. For the first day, their mission proceeded exactly according to plan. They observed and documented vehicle movements, noting the types of trucks and the timing of their passage through the valley. Kim recorded the information in detailed logs that would help intelligence analysts identify patterns and plan future operations. Looks like most of the heavy traffic moves through just after dawn and again around sunset, Washington observed during his watch shift, probably trying to avoid being spotted by our aircraft during peak daylight hours. His analysis showed the kind of tactical thinking that made him valuable despite his relative inexperience. Morrison finally managed to establish reliable radio contact with headquarters as atmospheric conditions improved during the afternoon. Base, this is Recon Team 7. We're in position and beginning observation activities. All team members present and accounted for. The confirmation brought visible relief to the entire team, knowing that their lifeline to support remained intact. The second day brought more of the same routine surveillance work, but with an unsettling development. Rodriguez spotted what appeared to be organized patrols moving through the valley, suggesting that enemy forces were conducting their own security operations. These guys are being more careful than usual, he reported to Chun. Could mean they're expecting trouble or planning something big. As evening approached on their second day, Kim noticed unusual activity around one of the larger villages. Multiple vehicles arriving from different directions, she reported through her scope. Looks like some kind of gathering or meeting. The convergence of forces was exactly the type of intelligence their mission was designed to gather. Chun made the decision to extend their observation period slightly to document this unexpected development. We'll monitor until 2200 hours, then resume normal watch schedules, he decided. The additional intelligence could prove valuable to mission planners back at headquarters. It was Morrison who first noticed that something had gone wrong. During his scheduled radio check with headquarters, he received only static in response to his transmissions. Base, this is Recon Team 7. Do you copy? He repeated several times, adjusting frequencies and checking his equipment. The silence that greeted his efforts sent a chill through the entire team. Equipment malfunction? Chen asked, though he suspected the answer would be more complicated than a simple technical problem. Morrison's expertise with communications gear was well established, and he had successfully maintained contact throughout the mission until now. Negative. All equipment shows green across the board, Morrison replied, his voice carrying the tension they all felt. Something's actively jamming our frequencies. This isn't atmospheric interference. The implications of deliberate signal jamming were clear to everyone. Enemy forces knew about their presence, and were taking active measures to isolate them. Before anyone could respond to Morrison's analysis, Washington's urgent whisper froze them all in place. Movement on the trail below us. Multiple contacts approaching our position. Through his binoculars, he could see armed figures moving with the careful deliberation of experienced fighters conducting a search operation. Reeves immediately moved to confirm Washington's observation while the rest of the team prepared their defensive positions. Count at least 12 fighters, possibly more, he whispered in his radio. They're moving like they know exactly where they're going. The organized nature of the enemy approach suggested detailed intelligence about the Rangers' mission and location. Chen's mind raced through their limited options as he processed the rapidly deteriorating situation. Their extraction point was miles away through hostile territory. Their communications were being jammed, and they were significantly outnumbered by enemy forces who appeared to have advanced knowledge of their presence. The carefully planned mission had become a fight for survival. Kim, can you get to higher ground for Overwatch? Chen asked, knowing that their medic's sniper training might prove crucial in the coming engagement. The rocky terrain above their current position offered several potential shooting positions that could provide covering fire for the team. Already moving, Kim replied, gathering her rifle and essential gear while staying below the sight lines that might expose her position to the approaching enemy forces. Her movements showed the practiced efficiency of someone who had trained extensively for exactly this type of emergency situation. Morrison continued his attempts to establish radio contact while the team prepared for what appeared to be an inevitable confrontation. Still nothing on any frequency, he reported. They've got professional-grade jamming equipment down there. The sophistication of the enemy's electronic warfare capabilities suggested they were facing a more formidable opponent than initial intelligence had indicated. The sound of loose rocks cascading down the mountainside announced that their enemies were getting closer. Rodriguez and Washington took positions behind the largest boulders, creating interlocking fields of fire that would force any attackers to advance through a deadly crossfire. Their training had prepared them for defensive operations, but the isolated location and enemy numbers created serious challenges. Movement stopped, Reeves reported from his observation position. They're about 200 meters below us. Looks like they're setting up their own positions. The pause in enemy movement suggested they were preparing for a coordinated assault rather than a hasty attack, giving the Rangers time to improve their defensive preparations, but also indicating a prolonged engagement. Chen used the temporary lull to assess their ammunition and water supplies. Each team member carried enough ammunition for a sustained firefight, but their water reserves were calculated for a normal 3-day observation mission, not an extended siege situation. The mathematics of survival became grimly clear. They could fight effectively for several hours, but their supplies would not last indefinitely. We need to break contact and move to the extraction point, Reeves suggested, voicing what they all understood to be their best option for survival. If we can reach the pickup zone, Foster might be able to get us out ahead of schedule. The plan required moving through several miles of hostile territory while being pursued by enemy forces, but remaining in their current position guaranteed eventual defeat. Before Chun could respond, the crack of rifle fire echoed across the mountainside, followed immediately by the distinctive whistle of bullets passing overhead. The enemy had opened fire from multiple positions, confirming that the Rangers were completely surrounded. Chips of stone exploded from the boulders around them as enemy marksmen found their range. Contact front and flanks, Washington called out as he returned fire toward the muzzle flashes visible in the rocks below. His M4 rifle barked repeatedly as he engaged targets that appeared briefly between defensive positions. The enemy had chosen their positions well, making effective return fire difficult while maintaining continuous pressure on the trapped Rangers. Kim's voice crackled through their short-range radios from her elevated position. I count at least 20 fighters in coordinated positions. They've got us completely surrounded. Her sniper's perspective revealed the full scope of their tactical situation, confirming that escape would require fighting through prepared enemy positions. The firefight intensified as more enemy weapons joined the engagement. The Rangers found themselves under constant fire from multiple directions, forcing them to keep their heads down and limiting their ability to return effective fire. Rodriguez managed to silence one enemy position with well-aimed shots, but two more immediately opened fire to replace it. Ammunition status? Chun called out during a brief lull in the enemy fire. The answer confirmed his worst fears. Each team member had already expended a significant portion of their combat load during the opening minutes of the engagement. At their current rate of fire, they would exhaust their ammunition within hours. Morrison continued his desperate attempts to raise headquarters on the radio, trying different frequencies and power levels despite the ongoing jamming. Still nothing. He reported between bursts of enemy fire. Whatever they're using down, there's covering every frequency we have. The isolation was complete, leaving them entirely dependent on their own resources for survival. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, Chen realized that their situation would only become more desperate during the hours of darkness. Enemy forces would have the advantage of local knowledge and superior numbers for conducting night operations, while the Rangers would be limited to defensive positions with decreasing fields of view. We're going to have to make this last, Chen told his team as another volley of enemy fire forced them deeper into their defensive positions. The words carried the weight of command decision that no leader wanted to make. They would fight with what they had and hope for a miracle that seemed increasingly unlikely to arrive. The radio crackled with static as Morrison made one more attempt to establish contact with any friendly forces. Instead of the familiar voice of headquarters, they heard fragmentary transmissions from other units operating in the region. Through the interference and jamming, Chun caught pieces of conversations that made his blood run cold. Recon Team 7, overdue for check-in. Search and rescue operations. Sniper in the area, impossible shots. The fragments of radio chatter suggested that other forces were aware of their situation, but also indicated that help was not immediately available. More mysteriously, the references to a sniper making impossible shots created questions that none of them could answer. Who was operating in their area? And why were other units talking about a single sniper as if that individual represented significant combat capability? As full darkness settled over the mountains and enemy fire continued to pin them down, the Rangers prepared for what would be the longest night of their military careers. Their ammunition was running low, their water was carefully rationed, and their communication remained severed by sophisticated jamming equipment. But somewhere in the static-filled radio transmissions, they had heard mention of someone who might represent their only hope for survival. Chun looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the clear mountain sky, and found himself hoping that legends might sometimes prove to be real. Because if the stories were true, and if that mysterious sniper was somewhere in these mountains, then perhaps miracles could still happen in the 21st century. The night stretched ahead of them like an eternity, filled with the sound of distant gunfire and the knowledge that dawn would bring either rescue or their final battle against overwhelming odds. 200 miles away at Forward Operating Base Shepherd, the morning briefing room buzzed with the kind of tension that only comes when good soldiers go missing. Colonel Patricia Hayes studied the tactical display screen with growing frustration, watching as red indicators showed the last known position of Recon Team 7. The silence from Chen's team had stretched past 18 hours, well beyond any acceptable communication window for a routine surveillance mission. Last confirmed contact was at 1900 hours yesterday, reported Major Tom Bradley, the base intelligence officer. His usually confident demeanor showed cracks of concern as he consulted his notes. Team 7 was reporting normal observation activities when their communications went dark. No distress call, no indication of problems. The sudden silence was more ominous than any emergency transmission would have been. Captain Lisa Warren, the operations officer responsible for coordinating rescue efforts, highlighted several areas on the digital map. We've got 2 Blackhawks on standby for immediate dispatch, but the weather window is closing fast. Mountain storms are expected to move in within 6 hours. The meteorological forecast added another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. Hayes turned to address Staff Sergeant Kevin Murphy, who had served as the primary radio operator during Team 7's mission planning phase. "Any possibility this is equipment failure rather than enemy action?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. Murphy's expertise with communication systems made his assessment particularly valuable. "Negative, ma'am," Murphy replied immediately. "Morrison's one of our best comm specialists, and they had backup systems for exactly this type of situation. If we're not hearing from them, it's because someone's actively preventing their transmissions." The implications of deliberate signal jamming pointed toward a more serious threat than equipment malfunction. Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, the base commander's deputy, studied satellite imagery from the reconnaissance area. "Intelligence suggests increased enemy activity in that sector over the past week. It's possible Team 7 stumbled into a larger operation than we anticipated." The satellite photos showed vehicle movements and congregations of personnel that indicated significant insurgent presence. As the briefing continued, Sergeant Major Robert Stone entered the room with the measured pace of a man carrying important news. At 52, Stone represented the accumulated wisdom of 3 decades in special operations, and his presence immediately commanded attention from everyone present. "Colonel, I think I might have a solution to our problem," he announced. Hayes looked up from the tactical display with immediate interest. Stone's reputation for unconventional solutions had saved lives on numerous occasions throughout his career. "Let's hear it, Sergeant Major," she said, gesturing for him to continue. "There's someone operating in the mountains about 50 miles from Team 7's last known position," Stone began, consulting a folder of papers he had brought with him. "Call sign Ghost Actual. Lone operator, sniper qualification, has been conducting independent operations in that region for the past month." His words created immediate interest among the assembled officers. Major Bradley frowned as he consulted his own intelligence files. "We don't have any authorized sniper operations in that area. Who's running this Ghost Actual?" The absence of official records for such operations was highly unusual and potentially problematic from a command perspective. Stone's expression became carefully neutral, the look of someone who had spent years navigating military bureaucracy and its complexities. "That's where it gets interesting, sir. Ghost Actual isn't officially attached to any unit currently deployed in theater. The operator has been working independently, responding to emergency situations and providing support where needed." His careful phrasing suggested layers of complexity that weren't immediately apparent. "Independent contractor?" Captain Warren asked, though her tone indicated skepticism about unofficial operators working in their area of responsibility. The presence of unaccounted personnel created serious coordination and safety concerns for legitimate military operations. "Something like that," Stone replied diplomatically. "What matters is the track record. Over the past month, Ghost Actual has been credited with at least 6 confirmed enemy kills, 3 successful extractions of wounded personnel, and 2 instances of providing overwatch for units under fire. The statistics were impressive, but they also raise questions about why such activities weren't being reported through normal channels." Hayes studied Stone's face carefully, recognizing the signs of someone who knew more than he was revealing. "Sergeant Major, if this operator has been conducting successful missions in our area, why haven't we heard about it through official channels?" Her question carried the weight of command authority that expected complete answers. Stone opened his folder and extracted several photographs, spreading them across the briefing table for the assembled officers to examine. The images showed the aftermath of precision shooting, disabled vehicles, neutralized enemy positions, and evacuated personnel. These were taken by units that received assistance from Ghost Actual. The results speak for themselves. The photographs told a story of remarkable marksmanship and tactical effectiveness. One image showed an enemy machine gun position that had been neutralized by what appeared to be a single shot from extreme range. Another documented the successful extraction of 3 wounded Marines who had been pinned down for hours before Ghost Actual's intervention. "What's the effective range on these shots?" asked Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, examining a photo that showed an enemy vehicle disabled by precise fire through its engine block. His background in armored operations gave him appreciation for the difficulty of such targeting. Confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,200 meters, Stone answered matter-of-factly. Some of the shots were made under adverse weather conditions with crosswinds that would challenge Olympic-level marksmen. The technical achievement represented shooting skills that bordered on the impossible. Major Bradley consulted his intelligence assessments with growing puzzlement. These kinds of results typically come from sniper teams with spotters and specialized equipment. How is one person achieving this level of effectiveness? The question reflected standard military doctrine about the requirements for successful long-range engagements. That's what makes Ghost Actual special, Stone explained, pointing to specific details in the photographs. The operator works alone, carries minimal equipment, and somehow manages to be exactly where needed when emergencies develop. It's like having a guardian angel with a rifle. His description sounded more like folklore than military reality. Captain Warren studied the timeline of Ghost Actual's activities, noting the geographical spread of the documented interventions. These locations are spread across hundreds of square miles of hostile territory. How is one person covering that much ground? The logistics of such wide-ranging operations seem to defy practical limitations. Stone's expression suggested that he shared her puzzlement about Ghost Actual's methods. Nobody knows for certain. The operator appears at crisis points, provides effective support, and then disappears without making contact with the units involved. We only know about these activities because of after-action reports and debriefings. The mysterious nature of the operations added to their legend-like quality. Hayes made a command decision based on the information presented. Can we establish contact with this Ghost Actual? If Team 7 is in trouble, we need every available asset to support their extraction. Her practical focus on results outweighed concerns about unconventional operating procedures. That's the challenging part, Stone admitted, consulting his notes again. Ghost Actual doesn't maintain regular communication schedules and doesn't respond to standard military frequencies. The operator seems to monitor emergency channels and responds to crisis situations independently. The communication difficulties created obvious coordination challenges. So we have a highly effective sniper operating in the same general area as our missing team, but we can't establish direct contact, Hayes summarized with visible frustration. How does that help us with Team 7 situation? The disconnect between available capability and command authority created serious operational concerns. Stone smiled slightly, the expression of someone who had anticipated this question. Emergency frequencies, ma'am. If we broadcast a general distress call on emergency channels, there's a good chance Ghost Actual will hear it and respond. The operator has a track record of answering calls for help. His suggestion represented an unconventional approach that might yield results where standard procedures had failed. The radio operator in the briefing room, Corporal Amanda Foster, had been monitoring communications throughout the discussion. Colonel, I'm picking up fragmentary transmissions from the Team 7 area. Heavy jamming, but there's definitely combat activity in progress. Her report confirmed everyone's worst fears about the missing reconnaissance team. Hayes immediately focused on the new information. Can you determine anything about the nature of the engagement? The tactical situation would influence any rescue operations they attempted to mount. Foster adjusted her equipment settings, trying to filter through the interference that surrounded the combat area. Intermittent small arms fire, multiple participants. The jamming is sophisticated, probably military-grade equipment. Her technical assessment suggested that enemy forces were well-equipped and organized. Major Bradley consulted his tactical maps while considering their limited options. Standard rescue operations would require significant air support and ground forces. We're looking at a minimum 12-hour deployment window before we can reach Team 7's position. The time factor was critical given the ongoing combat activity. 12 hours might be too long, Stone observed grimly. If Team 7 is under sustained attack, their ammunition and supplies won't last indefinitely. They need immediate support, not a rescue operation tomorrow morning. His assessment reflected the harsh realities of combat mathematics. Hayes weighed their alternatives as she studied the tactical situation. Official rescue operations would be thorough and well-supported, but they would also take time to organize and deploy. Ghost Actual represented an unknown quantity who might already be in position to provide immediate assistance, but coordination would be nearly impossible. Corporal Foster, prepare an emergency broadcast on all available frequencies, Hayes ordered. General distress call requesting immediate assistance for forces in contact. Include Team 7's last known coordinates and current tactical situation. The decision represented a calculated risk that might attract help from unexpected sources. Foster began preparing the emergency transmission while Stone provided additional information about Ghost Actual's previous response patterns. Based on previous incidents, the operator typically responds within 2 hours of monitoring a distress call. Response time depends on distance and terrain between current position and the crisis area. The time frame offered hope, but no guarantees. As Foster began broadcasting their emergency request, the assembled officers continued monitoring communications from Team 7's area. The fragmentary transmissions painted a picture of desperate troops fighting for survival against overwhelming odds. Every hour that passed reduced their chances of successful extraction. Signal strength is fluctuating, Foster reported as she attempted to maintain the emergency broadcast despite ongoing interference. Whatever's jamming Team 7 is also affecting our ability to transmit clearly. There's no guarantee our message is getting through. The electronic warfare environment created additional challenges for any rescue coordination. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison examined the meteorological data showing the approaching storm system. Weather window is closing faster than predicted. If we don't get some kind of response soon, we'll be looking at ground operations only. No air support until the storms pass. The weather complications added another layer of urgency to their decision-making process. Stone studied the tactical display showing Team 7's position relative to known enemy strongholds. Ghost Actual's been operating in that region for weeks. Probably knows the terrain better than our maps indicate. If anyone can reach Team 7 quickly, it will be someone who's already familiar with the area. His logic was sound, but it still required faith in an unknown operator. The radio crackled with static as Foster continued her emergency broadcasts. Through the interference, they could hear occasional fragments of Team 7's communications, confirming that Chen's team was still fighting, but under severe pressure. The courage of the trapped Rangers was evident in every transmission fragment. "Ma'am, I'm getting something," Foster announced suddenly, as her equipment detected a new signal. Different frequency, minimal interference. Someone's responding to our distress call. The unexpected contact brought immediate attention from everyone in the briefing room. The voice that emerged from the radio speakers was calm and professional, cutting through the static with startling clarity. "Base station, this is Ghost Actual. I copy your emergency traffic regarding forces in contact. Coordinates received and confirmed. I'm approximately 30 minutes from the contact area." The response was everything they had hoped for and more. Hayes immediately moved to the radio as Foster handed her the microphone. "Ghost Actual, this is Colonel Hayes, base commander. Confirm you can provide immediate assistance to Recon Team 7. They've been under fire for several hours with communications disrupted." Her words carried both authority and desperate hope. "Colonel, I have visual contact with the engagement area," the voice replied with startling immediacy. "Count approximately 25 enemy fighters in prepared positions. Your people are outnumbered, but holding defensive positions effectively. I can provide immediate fire support." The tactical assessment was more detailed than anyone had expected. Major Bradley consulted his maps with amazement at the rapid response. 30 minutes from receiving our distress call to visual contact? How is that possible? The timeline seemed to defy normal movement capabilities across mountain terrain. Ghost Actual's voice returned before anyone could speculate further. "Beginning engagement now. Recommend your people maintain defensive positions while I reduce enemy numbers. We'll establish secure communication with team leader once immediate threats are neutralized." The confidence in the transmission was both reassuring and remarkable. Through their radio equipment, they could hear the distant crack of precision rifle fire echoing across the mountains. Each shot was followed by changes in the pattern of enemy fire directed at Team 7's position. Ghost Actual's intervention was having immediate tactical effect. Confirmed enemy casualties. Ghost Actual reported methodically. Enemy force strength reduced to approximately 20 fighters. Your team appears to have casualties, but is maintaining defensive integrity. Continuing engagement. The professional calm in the voice contrasted sharply with the life and death situation unfolding. Stone smiled grimly as he listened to the developing engagement. This is why Ghost Actual has become a legend. The operator shows up when needed most and delivers exactly what the situation requires. His confidence in the mysterious sniper was being validated in real time. Hayes maintained radio contact while monitoring the tactical situation. Ghost Actual, what support do you need from us? We have aircraft on standby and ground forces preparing for deployment. The offer of additional resources reflected standard military coordination procedures. Negative on additional support came the immediate reply. Weather conditions will prevent air operations within 2 hours. Ground forces would take too long to reach this location. I can handle the tactical situation and extract your people independently. The rejection of help was both surprising and concerning to the assembled officers. The sound of continuing rifle fire came through their communications equipment, punctuated by Ghost Actual's periodic situation reports. Enemy positions were being systematically eliminated with what appeared to be single shots for each target. The effectiveness was beyond anything they had witnessed in conventional operations. How many confirmed kills? Major Bradley asked during a brief lull in the engagement. The question reflected both professional curiosity and amazement at the ongoing demonstration of marksmanship. 12 enemy casualties confirmed, 8 probable. Ghost Actual responded without emotion. Enemy force is withdrawing from prepared positions. Your people should be able to reach extraction point within 2 hours if they move immediately. The tactical situation had been completely reversed through the intervention of a single operator. Foster monitored multiple radio frequencies as communication conditions improved with a reduction in enemy jamming equipment. I'm getting clear transmissions from Team 7 now, she reported excitedly. Staff Sergeant Chun confirms his team is mobile and moving toward extraction point. Hayes felt relief flood through her as she processed the dramatic change in circumstances. What had begun as a potential disaster was rapidly becoming a successful rescue operation through the intervention of their mysterious benefactor. Ghost Actual, how can we coordinate extraction for both your team and ours? She asked. I operate independently, came the calm reply. Your extraction procedures should proceed as planned. I'll provide overwatch until your people are safely recovered. The response maintained the pattern of professional distance that characterized all of Ghost Actual's communications. As the immediate crisis resolved, Hayes found herself with more questions than answers about their remarkable savior. Who is Ghost Actual? How had the operator acquired such extraordinary skills? And why was someone of this caliber operating independently rather than as part of official military units? The radio crackled one final time as Ghost Actual prepared to break contact. Your people are brave soldiers, Colonel. They held their positions against overwhelming odds until help could arrive. The enemy won't forget this engagement. The tribute to Team 7's courage carried genuine respect and admiration. Ghost Actual, wait, Hayes called into the radio. How can we contact you for future operations? Your capabilities would be valuable for our mission here. The request reflected her desire to formalize their relationship with this extraordinary operator. The response came after a long pause, as if Ghost Actual was considering how much information to reveal. I'll monitor emergency frequencies when possible, Colonel. When your people need help, I'll hear about it. The commitment was both reassuring and mysterious, offering support while maintaining complete independence. As the transmission ended and Ghost Actual faded back into the mountains, Hayes looked around the briefing room at her officers. They had witnessed something unprecedented, a single operator turning the tide of a desperate engagement through precision shooting that bordered on the miraculous. Team 7 would return safely to base because someone had answered their call for help when no official rescue was possible. But the questions about Ghost Actual's identity and capabilities would continue long after this mission ended, creating a legend that would inspire and puzzle soldiers for years to come. The figure that emerged from the mountain mist at dawn looked nothing like what Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun had expected. For hours, he and his team had listened to the systematic elimination of enemy positions around them, each precisely placed shot reducing the pressure on their desperate defensive perimeter. The gunfire had been so accurate and devastating that Chun had imagined their rescuer as some kind of superhuman warrior, a legendary special forces operator with decades of combat experience. Instead, the person who appeared at the edge of their defensive position was barely 5 feet tall, moving with the fluid grace of someone completely at home in the rugged mountain terrain. The sniper rifle carried with practiced ease seemed almost too large for the slight frame, yet every movement demonstrated absolute familiarity with both weapon and environment. What shocked Shin most was the face beneath the tactical gear. Unmistakably female, probably no older than 25, with dark eyes that held depths of experience far beyond her apparent years. "Staff Sergeant Chun?" the newcomer asked quietly, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had just single-handedly turned the tide of an impossible battle. "I am Alex. I heard you needed some assistance." The understatement was delivered with a slight smile that somehow managed to convey both humor and deadly seriousness. Chun stared for a moment, processing the disconnect between expectation and reality. "Your ghost actual?" he asked, though the evidence was undeniable. The timing, the tactical situation, and the sudden silence from enemy positions all pointed to this unlikely figure as their mysterious savior. "That's what they're calling me these days," Alex replied with a shrug, already scanning the surrounding terrain for any remaining threats. "How many casualties in your team? We need to move toward extraction soon. Weather's changing, and more enemy forces will be heading this way once word spreads about what happened here." Her assessment was delivered with the professional efficiency of someone thoroughly familiar with combat dynamics. Corporal Sarah Kim emerged from her overwatch position above their defensive perimeter, her sniper rifle still trained on potential enemy avenues of approach. "2 wounded, neither critical," she reported to Chun while studying their unexpected rescuer with obvious curiosity. "Rodriguez has a graze on his left arm. Washington took some shrapnel in his leg, but both are mobile." The medical assessment was delivered with the precision that had earned Kim her nickname. Alex nodded and consulted what appeared to be a hand-drawn map, comparing it to the terrain around them. "Extraction point is about 4 miles through some challenging country. We can make it in 2 hours if we move steadily, but the route requires some technical climbing in a couple of places." Her knowledge of the local terrain was clearly extensive and detailed. Morrison, their communications specialist, finally managed to establish clear contact with headquarters as the enemy jamming equipment had been eliminated along with its operators. "Base, this is Team 7. We're mobile and moving to extraction with assistance from Ghost Actual. Casualties minimal, all team members able to travel." The relief in his voice was obvious to everyone listening. While Morrison handled radio communications, Chun found himself studying Alex more closely. Everything about her equipment and bearings suggested someone with extensive training and experience, but her appearance challenged every assumption he had formed about elite military operators. "Mind if I ask about your background?" he inquired as they prepared to move out. Alex shouldered her rifle and adjusted her pack with movements that spoke of countless hours in the field. "Not much to tell, really. I grew up hunting in Montana, joined the Army right out of high school, went through sniper school, deployed a few times." Her summary was delivered with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather rather than describing the path to extraordinary marksmanship. "Few times," Sergeant First Class Antonio Reeves asked skeptically as he checked his gear one final time. His experience with military operations told him that Alex's capabilities required far more than routine deployments to develop. "What units have you served with?" The question seemed to create a moment of hesitation in Alex's demeanor, as if she was deciding how much information to reveal. "Various special operations assignments. Nothing I could discuss in detail." The diplomatic non-answer suggested classified activities that couldn't be shared with reconnaissance personnel. Private First Class Tyler Washington, despite his wounded leg, moved to join the conversation. At 19, He possessed the kind of curiosity that military service hadn't yet trained out of him. How did you know we were in trouble? We couldn't get communications out through the jamming. His question reflected the mystery that puzzled all of them. Alex began leading them away from their defensive positions along what appeared to be an invisible trail through the rocky terrain. I monitor emergency frequencies when I'm in the field. Heard the distress call from your base and realized I was close enough to help. Her explanation was technically accurate, but somehow felt incomplete. As they moved through the challenging mountain terrain, Chun observed Alex's movement techniques with professional appreciation. She navigated obstacles and potential hazards with an efficiency that spoke of intimate familiarity with this specific area. Her route selection consistently chose paths that provided concealment while minimizing physical demands on the wounded team members. How long have you been operating in this region? Rodriguez asked during a brief rest stop where Alex checked their back trail for signs of pursuit. His tactical training made him curious about the intelligence requirements for such effective independent operations. About 6 weeks, Alex replied while studying the distant ridgelines through her scope. Intelligence suggested increased enemy activity in this area, so I've been monitoring the situation and providing support where needed. Her mission description suggested a level of operational independence that was highly unusual in military operations. Kim, whose own sniper training gave her appreciation for the technical challenges involved, asked the question that had been troubling her since Alex's arrival. Those shots you made to extract us from the ambush, some of them had to be over 1,200 meters in difficult wind conditions. How do you consistently make shots like that? Alex paused in her surveillance activities to consider the question carefully. Combination of factors, I suppose. Good training, extensive practice, and maybe some natural aptitude for the work. The modest response significantly understated the level of skill they had witnessed during their rescue. Natural aptitude doesn't explain making 20 precision shots in succession under combat conditions, Reeves observed with the skepticism of someone who understood the practical limitations of even exceptional marksmanship. What you did out there was beyond anything I've seen in 15 years of military service. The compliment seemed to make Alex uncomfortable, as if she preferred to avoid attention for her capabilities. Sometimes you just have good days, she replied with a slight smile. Today happened to be one of them. The deflection was obvious, but delivered with enough humor to avoid seeming dismissive of their appreciation. Morrison, monitoring radio communications as they traveled, reported improved contact with headquarters and updated extraction procedures. Weather window is holding for now, but storms are definitely moving in. Extraction team wants us at the pickup point within 90 minutes. The timeline created additional pressure for their movement through difficult terrain. Alex consulted her hand-drawn map again and adjusted their route slightly to compensate for the time constraints. We can make it if we pick up the pace through the next section. There's a more direct path that requires some rock climbing, but it saves about 30 minutes. Her route modifications demonstrated detailed knowledge of multiple travel options. As they continued moving toward the extraction point, Washington's curiosity got the better of his military discretion. Alex, why are you out here operating alone instead of with a regular unit? Someone with your skills could write their own ticket for assignment anywhere. The question reflected what they were all wondering. The inquiry created another moment of hesitation in Alex's responses, as if she was weighing how much personal information to share. Sometimes independent operations are more effective than large unit deployments. Fewer people, less coordination required, more flexibility to respond to changing situations. The explanation addressed tactics rather than personal motivations. But the risks, Chin pointed out as they navigated around a particularly challenging cliff face. Operating alone in hostile territory without backup or regular communication schedules. One mistake or equipment failure, and nobody would even know what happened to you. His concerns reflected standard military doctrine about the dangers of independent operations. Alex secured a climbing rope around a convenient anchor point and began preparing for the technical section of their route. Risk is relative. Large unit operations have their own vulnerabilities. More people to coordinate, more equipment that can fail, more signatures that enemy forces can detect. Her counterarguments suggested extensive thought about operational philosophies. As they began the climbing section of their escape route, Kim found herself impressed by Alex's technical skills beyond marksmanship. The rope work and climbing techniques demonstrated proficiency that required extensive training and practice. "Where did you learn mountain operations?" she asked while following Alex's precisely placed anchor points. "Montana childhood provided a good foundation," Alex replied while establishing a belay position for the team members crossing a particularly exposed section. Military training built on that base with more technical skills and tactical applications. The combination of natural environment and professional development had clearly produced exceptional capabilities. Rodriguez, despite his wounded arm, managed the climbing section with determination that earned visible respect from Alex. "You mentioned monitoring this area for 6 weeks. Have you identified the command structure for enemy operations in this region?" His intelligence training made him curious about the broader tactical picture. Alex helped Rodriguez through a particularly challenging section before responding to his question. "There's definitely organized leadership coordinating activities across multiple valleys. Sophisticated communication equipment, professional military tactics, probably experienced commanders with formal training." Her assessment matched intelligence estimates, but provided additional detail from direct observation. "Any idea where their main command post might be located?" Morrison asked as he negotiated his way up the rocky face, with his communications equipment creating additional challenges. "The information could prove valuable for future operations in the region." "Working on that," Alex replied diplomatically. "Intelligence gathering takes time, and I haven't been able to get close enough to their primary facilities for detailed reconnaissance." The admission suggested that even her exceptional capabilities had practical limitations. As they reached the top of the climbing section and prepared for the final approach to their extraction point, Sean found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about special operations and individual capability. Alex's rescue of his team had been accomplished through a combination of technical skill, tactical knowledge, and personal courage that exceeded anything in his previous experience. "Alex," he said as they paused to check their position against the GPS coordinates for extraction, "I don't know what your long-term plans are, but if you ever decide you want to work with a regular unit again, I'd be honored to serve with you." The offer was both professional recognition and personal tribute to someone who had saved their lives. Alex smiled genuinely for the first time since their initial contact. "I appreciate that, Staff Sergeant. Your team showed real courage out there, holding your position against overwhelming odds until help could arrive. That kind of determination is what makes the difference between survival and disaster." The compliment was clearly sincere and carried the weight of someone who understood the psychological demands of desperate combat. The sound of approaching helicopters reached them before the aircraft became visible, signaling that their extraction was proceeding on schedule despite the challenging circumstances. Alex immediately began scanning the surrounding terrain for potential threats that might complicate the pickup operation. "Will you be coming out with us?" Washington asked hopefully as they prepared landing signals for the incoming aircraft. The question reflected the team's desire to learn more about their mysterious rescuer and her remarkable capabilities. Alex shook her head while continuing her security scan of the area. "I've got other commitments in the region, but it's been an honor working with you all." The polite refusal maintained the pattern of independence that characterized all her operations. As the extraction helicopters settled into their landing zones and Chen's team prepared to depart, Alex simply melted back into the mountain terrain with the same quiet efficiency that had marked her arrival. One moment she was providing final security overwatch for their extraction, and the next she had disappeared completely into the rocky landscape. Chen looked back toward the mountains as their helicopter lifted off, wondering if they would ever see Alex again, or if she would remain one of those legends that soldiers tell around campfires. What he knew for certain was that somewhere in those unforgiving peaks, an extraordinary individual continued to answer calls for help when no one else could reach the desperate and the lost. The flight back to base gave him time to process the remarkable events of the past few hours, but questions about Alex's background, capabilities, and motivations would continue to puzzle him for years to come. Some mysteries, he reflected, were more important for what they accomplished than for what they revealed. The battle that would later be remembered as the Miracle of Eagles Peak began 3 days after Alex had successfully extracted Recon Team 7 from their desperate situation. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces were planning a major offensive against forward operating Base Shepherd, using the same mountain corridors that had nearly claimed Chen's team. What military planners didn't anticipate was that Alex had remained in the area, continuing her independent surveillance operations and gathering intelligence about enemy intentions. Colonel Patricia Hayes studied the latest intelligence briefings with growing concern. Intercepted communications suggested that insurgent forces were massing for a coordinated attack involving at least 200 fighters equipped with sophisticated weapons and communication systems. The planned assault represented the largest enemy operation attempted in the region during the past year. They're using the valleys as staging areas, Major Tom Bradley reported while highlighting suspected enemy positions on the tactical display. Satellite imagery shows significant vehicle movements and personnel concentrations in at least 4 locations. This is definitely more than routine harassment operations. The scale of enemy preparations suggested serious strategic intentions rather than opportunistic attacks. Captain Lisa Warren consulted weather forecasts that added another complication to their defensive planning. Storm systems are expected to limit air support for the next 48 hours. If they attack during the weather window, will be largely dependent on ground-based defenses. The meteorological constraints would significantly limit their ability to respond with overwhelming firepower. Sergeant Major Robert Stone entered the briefing room with a measured pace that indicated important new information. His expression carried the gravity of someone who had identified serious problems with their current tactical situation. "Colonel, we've got additional intelligence about enemy capabilities that changes our defensive requirements," he announced. Hayes immediately gave him her full attention, recognizing that Stone's assessments were typically accurate and actionable. "What are we looking at, Sergeant Major?" she asked while gesturing for him to proceed with his briefing. Stone activated the digital display system and began showing reconnaissance photographs taken over the past 72 hours. Enemy forces have acquired professional military equipment, including heavy machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, and what appears to be crew-served mortars. This isn't the typical small arms engagement we've been dealing with. The upgraded enemy capabilities represented a quantum increase in the threat level they faced. Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison studied the weapons displayed in the intelligence photographs with obvious concern. Where do they acquire military-grade equipment like this? These aren't weapons that insurgent forces typically have access to. The sophisticated armaments suggested external support or successful raids against military installations. Intelligence suggests possible foreign support, but we haven't confirmed the source, Bradley replied while consulting his classified assessment files. What matters immediately is that enemy forces now have the capability to conduct sustained attacks against our defensive positions. The strategic implications were clear regardless of how the weapons had been acquired. As the briefing continued, Corporal Amanda Foster monitored radio communications from the field and detected unusual activity on emergency frequencies. "Colonel, I'm picking up transmissions from the same area where we lost contact with Team 7. Someone's conducting surveillance operations and reporting enemy movements." The unexpected intelligence source created immediate interest among the assembled officers. Hayes moved to the communication station as Foster fine-tuned her equipment to improve signal clarity. The voice that emerged from the speakers was familiar to everyone who had participated in Team 7's rescue operation 3 days earlier. "Base Station, this is Ghost Actual. I have eyes on significant enemy force concentrations preparing for coordinated assault operations." "Ghost Actual, this is Colonel Hayes," she responded immediately. "We copy your transmission. Can you provide detailed intelligence about enemy strength and positions?" The unexpected contact with their mysterious ally represented an invaluable intelligence opportunity. Alex's voice came through clearly despite the mountain terrain that typically interfered with radio communications. Confirmed enemy strength, approximately 250 fighters organized into 5 separate units. They have heavy weapons, professional communications, and detailed knowledge of your base defensive arrangements. The assessment exceeded their worst-case planning scenarios. Stone consulted the tactical maps while processing Alex's intelligence report. How did they acquire information about our defensive positions? He asked, recognizing that such detailed intelligence represented a serious security breach. Unknown at this time, Alex replied after a brief pause. But their movement patterns and positioning suggest they know exactly where your weak points are located. They're planning a multi-axis attack designed to overwhelm your defensive capabilities. The tactical analysis was both professionally accurate and deeply troubling. Major Bradley activated recording equipment to ensure they captured all details of Alex's intelligence briefing. Ghost Actual, can you provide specific coordinates for enemy positions? We need targeting information for defensive preparations. The request reflected standard military procedures for processing intelligence from field sources. Transmitting coordinates now. Alex responded as precise geographical information began appearing on their tactical display systems. Be advised that enemy forces are mobile and repositioning regularly. Some of these locations may be outdated by the time your operations commence. The dynamic nature of the threat created additional challenges for defensive planning. Hayes studied the enemy positions as they appeared on our tactical maps, noting how effectively the insurgent forces had positioned themselves to exploit the natural terrain advantages. Ghost Actual, what's your assessment of our defensive options given this enemy disposition? The question reflected her recognition of Alex's demonstrated tactical expertise. Your current defensive arrangements are insufficient for the scale of attack they're planning, Alex replied with characteristic directness. They have the numbers and positioning to overrun at least 2 of your perimeter strongpoints. You need to reinforce those areas or find ways to disrupt their attack before it reaches your defensive lines. The blunt assessment confirmed their worst fears about the upcoming engagement. Captain Warren consulted their available resources while considering Alex's recommendations. Our reserve forces are already committed to existing defensive positions. We don't have additional personnel for significant reinforcement operations. The personnel limitations created serious constraints on their tactical options. Then, we need to disrupt their attack during the approach phase, Stone observed, recognizing that prevention might be more effective than reaction. If we can break up their coordination before they reach our perimeter, smaller defensive forces might be sufficient. The strategy required precise timing and detailed intelligence about enemy movement patterns. Alex's voice returned with a proposal that surprised everyone in the briefing room. I can provide advance warning when their attack begins and disrupt their coordination with precision fire during the approach phase. My position gives me oversight of multiple attack routes. The offer represented exactly the kind of support they needed but had no right to expect. Hayes hesitated before responding, recognizing both the value of Alex's assistance and the ethical implications of relying on independent operators for critical defensive operations. Ghost Actual, we appreciate the offer, but you would be operating against overwhelming odds without backup or support. That's beyond reasonable risk levels. Her concern reflected both military prudence and personal respect for someone who had already done more than enough. Colonel, with respect, risk assessment is my responsibility, Alex replied with quiet determination. These enemy forces represent a serious threat to your base and your personnel. I'm in a position to help, and I intend to do so regardless of official authorization. The decision was clearly final and not subject to debate. Stone smiled grimly as he listened to Alex's commitment to assist their defense despite official concerns about her safety. Ghost Actual, what support do you need from us? We can't provide direct assistance, but we might be able to coordinate timing or provide intelligence updates. The offer reflected their desire to help while respecting Alex's independence. Maintain normal defensive procedures and be prepared to respond when their attack develops, Alex instructed. I'll provide real-time intelligence about enemy movements and reduce their numbers during the approach phase. Your job is to finish what I start. The tactical coordination was simple, but potentially very effective. As the briefing concluded and officers dispersed to prepare their defensive positions, Hayes maintained radio contact with Alex to coordinate final details. Ghost Actual, how confident are you about disrupting an attack of this magnitude? 250 fighters represents significant opposition, even for someone with your capabilities. Alex's response carried the calm confidence that had characterized all her communications. I've been studying their movement patterns and leadership structure for several days. Eliminating key personnel at critical moments can create chaos that numbers can't overcome. The strategy was sound, but required precision timing and exceptional marksmanship under extreme pressure. Over the following hours, Alex provided continuous intelligence updates as enemy forces completed their final preparations for the assault. Her reports documented the movement of heavy weapons, the positioning of assault teams, and the coordination procedures that would guide their attack. The level of detail she provided exceeded anything available through conventional intelligence gathering. Enemy forces beginning final approach movements, Alex reported as darkness settled over the mountain region. Multiple columns moving toward attack positions. Estimated time to contact with your defensive perimeter is approximately 2 hours. The timing gave defenders final opportunities to complete their preparations. Hayes activated base-wide communications to alert all defensive positions about the impending attack. All stations, this is base command. Enemy assault expected within 2 hours. Multiple approach routes. Heavy weapons confirmed. Maintain defensive positions and await further instructions. The alert sent hundreds of soldiers to their fighting positions throughout the installation. As enemy forces moved closer to the base perimeter, Alex began the systematic elimination of key personnel that would disrupt their coordination and reduce their combat effectiveness. Each shot was carefully planned to maximize psychological impact while reducing enemy leadership capabilities. First enemy column leader eliminated. Alex reported with professional calm as the distinctive crack of her rifle echoed across the mountains. Column is stopping to reorganize. Estimated delay, 15 minutes. The immediate tactical effect of removing leadership during movement was exactly what their defensive plan required. The sound of distant gunfire reached the base as Alex continued her precision engagement of enemy forces during their approach to defensive positions. Each shot was followed by reports of confusion and delays in enemy movements as units lost coordination and leadership. Heavy weapons team neutralized on the eastern approach. Alex continued her systematic reporting. Enemy forces are beginning to realize they're under precision fire, but cannot locate the source. Several units are taking cover and delaying their advance. The psychological effect of accurate sniper fire was proving as valuable as the physical casualties. Major Bradley monitored radio intercepts from enemy communications and confirmed that Alex's intervention was creating significant disruption in their attack coordination. Enemy commanders are reporting sniper contact and requesting instructions. Their advance has slowed considerably while they try to identify threats. The intelligence confirmed that Alex's strategy was working exactly as planned. As the enemy attack finally reached the base defensive perimeter, their numbers have been significantly reduced and their coordination seriously disrupted by Alex's precision engagement during their approach. What should have been an overwhelming assault became a series of uncoordinated attacks that defensive forces could handle effectively. Enemy casualties estimated at 40 to 50 fighters during approach phase. Alex reported as the main battle commenced around the base perimeter. Remaining forces are disorganized and attacking in small groups rather than coordinated units. The tactical situation had been completely altered through the intervention of a single exceptional operator. The battle for forward operating base Shepard lasted through the night, but the outcome was determined during those crucial hours when Alex systematically eliminated enemy leadership and disrupted their attack coordination. What military planners had feared would be an overwhelming assault became a defensive victory achieved through courage, skill, and the remarkable intervention of someone who refused to abandon soldiers in need. As dawn broke over the mountains and enemy forces withdrew in defeat, radio transmissions confirmed that Alex had once again accomplished the impossible. Through precision shooting that bordered on the miraculous, she had turned the tide of a desperate battle and saved hundreds of lives. The cost of victory was measured not just in enemy casualties, but in a knowledge that somewhere in those unforgiving peaks, an extraordinary individual continued to stand watch over those who serve their country far from home. The miracle of Eagle's Peak would become legend, But the person who made it possible remained as mysterious as ever. 6 months after the Battle of Eagles Peak, investigative journalist Sarah Martinez sat in a small coffee shop in Kalispell, Montana, staring at a collection of photographs and documents that told an impossible story. Her investigation into the legendary Ghost Actual had taken her from Pentagon briefing rooms to remote mountain villages, collecting pieces of a puzzle that seemed to defy logical explanation. The woman sitting across from her looked nothing like the mythical figure that had captured military imagination around the world. Alexandra Alex Thompson appeared to be an ordinary 26-year-old woman enjoying coffee with a stranger. Her slight build and quiet demeanor provided no hint of the extraordinary capabilities that had saved dozens of lives in the mountains of Afghanistan. Only her eyes suggested depths of experience that contradicted her youthful appearance, holding memories of decisions made under impossible pressure. "I'm still not sure why you agreed to this interview," Martinez admitted as she consulted her notes. For someone who has avoided all official recognition, talking to a journalist seems inconsistent with your preference for anonymity. The contradiction had puzzled her since Alex had unexpectedly responded to her carefully placed inquiries about Ghost Actual's identity. Alex smiled slightly while stirring her coffee, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both warmth and wariness. Sometimes stories need to be told, even when the people involved would prefer to remain anonymous. What happened in Afghanistan wasn't about me specifically. It was about what's possible when someone refuses to abandon people in need. Her explanation focused on principles rather than personal recognition. Martinez activated her digital recorder and consulted the timeline she had constructed through months of investigation. "Let's start with your background. You grew up here in Montana, learned to hunt and shoot from your father, joined the Army at 18. But the official records stop after your completion of sniper school. What happened next?" The question addressed the gap that had made her investigation so challenging. "Various assignments, different units, classified operations that I can't discuss in detail," Alex replied diplomatically. "What matters is that the training was excellent and the experience was comprehensive. I learned everything the Army could teach about precision shooting and tactical operations." The summary glossed over what Martinez suspected were years of dangerous special operations assignments. "But you're no longer officially attached to any military unit," Martinez pressed, knowing that Alex's current status was one of the central mysteries surrounding Ghost Actual's activities. How does someone transition from active duty to independent operations in a combat zone? The question addressed what appeared to be an unprecedented situation in military operations. Alex's expression became more serious as she considered how much information to reveal. Sometimes official channels aren't sufficient for addressing urgent situations. Independent operations allow for more flexibility and immediate response to crisis situations. The explanation addressed tactics rather than the personal decisions that had led to her current status. Martinez consulted photographs taken during the aftermath of various operations where Ghost Actual had provided assistance. These images show the results of precision shooting that experts say should be impossible under the documented conditions. How do you explain consistently making shots that exceed normal marksmanship capabilities? The technical achievements were what had first attracted her attention to the story. Combination of training, practice, and maybe some natural aptitude, Alex replied with a modest tone that characterized all her responses about her capabilities. "I've been shooting since I was 8 years old, and the Army provided world-class instruction in advanced techniques. Experience teaches you to compensate for variables that affect accuracy." The explanation was technically accurate, but somehow felt incomplete. Natural aptitude doesn't account for 20 consecutive hits at ranges exceeding 1,200 meters under combat conditions, Martinez pointed out, reading from expert analysis of Alex's documented achievements. "Military instructors describe your capabilities as unprecedented in their experience." The professional assessments contradicted Alex's modest self-evaluation. Alex seemed uncomfortable with the attention focused on her technical abilities. "Good days and bad days like any other profession. I've been fortunate to have more good days than bad when people needed help." The deflection was obvious, but delivered with enough sincerity to avoid seeming dismissive of legitimate questions. Martinez shifted her approach to focus on the human impact rather than technical capabilities. Let's talk about Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun and Recon Team 7. They were facing overwhelming odds when you intervened. What was going through your mind during that operation? The question addressed the decision-making process that led to such extraordinary risk-taking. Soldiers in trouble who needed immediate assistance. Alex replied immediately. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, and official rescue operations would have taken too long to reach them. Someone who was already in the area had to respond. The explanation emphasized necessity rather than heroism as the primary motivation. But the risks you accepted were enormous, Martinez observed, consulting military assessments of the tactical situation that Alex had faced. You engaged 25 enemy fighters single-handedly in difficult terrain without backup or communication support. That goes beyond normal risk tolerance. The analysis highlighted what military experts considered an impossible tactical situation. Alex paused to consider the question carefully, as if weighing how much personal information to share. Risk is always relative to consequences. If I hadn't acted, 6 good soldiers would have died. That made the decision easy, regardless of personal danger. The moral calculus was presented as straightforward despite its obvious complexity. Martinez studied Alex's face while asking her next question, looking for emotional responses that might reveal more than words. The families of those soldiers wrote letters thanking Ghost Actual for saving their loved ones. How does it feel to know that your actions allowed husbands and fathers to return home safely? The human dimension represented what had motivated her investigation from the beginning. For the first time during their conversation, Alex's composure showed cracks of genuine emotion. That's what makes everything worthwhile, she said quietly. Knowing that people get to go home to their families because someone was in the right place at the right time with the right skills. The personal connection to her mission was clearly profound and deeply felt. But what about your own family? Martinez asked gently, knowing that this was sensitive territory. Your parents must worry about the risks you're taking in these independent operations. The question addressed what she suspected was a source of ongoing personal conflict. Alex's expression became distant as she considered memories that were clearly painful. My father was killed in Iraq when I was 16. Roadside bomb, convoy operation, doing his job to protect other soldiers. My mother supported my decision to serve because she understood the importance of the mission. The personal loss explained much about Alex's motivation and commitment. Martinez felt the weight of that revelation as she processed its implications. So, your father's death influenced your decision to pursue military service and, ultimately, these independent operations? The connection between personal loss and extraordinary service seemed to complete part of the puzzle. He taught me that some things are more important than personal safety, Alex replied with quiet intensity. Protecting people who can't protect themselves, answering the call when no one else can respond, refusing to abandon those in need. These aren't abstract concepts when they're connected to real people with real families. The philosophical foundation for her actions was clearly deeply rooted. Martinez consulted her notes about Alex's post-military activities and the investigation that had brought them together. After the Battle of Eagles Peak, you disappeared completely from Afghanistan. Intelligence agencies searched for months without finding any trace of your activities. Where did you go? The question addressed one of the central mysteries that had frustrated official investigations. Other places where help was needed, Alex replied cryptically. The world has many conflict zones where individual intervention can make a difference. Official military operations can't address every crisis situation. The implication was that her activities had continued in other locations around the world. Are you saying there have been other operations similar to what happened in Afghanistan? Martinez asked, recognizing that this could represent a much larger story than she had initially imagined. Other situations where Ghost Actual provided assistance to military forces in crisis. The possibility opened entirely new dimensions to her investigation. Alex smiled enigmatically while finishing her coffee. Let's just say that soldiers sometimes receive help from unexpected sources when their situations become desperate. The important thing is that they get home safely to their families. The non-answer confirmed Martinez's suspicions while providing no specific information. Martinez realized that Alex's willingness to grant this interview had been carefully calculated to tell exactly as much of the story as she wanted revealed while maintaining operational security for ongoing activities. Why now? Why agree to tell part of this story after maintaining complete anonymity for so long? The timing seemed significant given Alex's previous commitment to remaining invisible. Because people need to understand that extraordinary things are possible when someone refuses to accept that good people must die for want of help. Alex explained, her voice carrying conviction that resonated with personal experience. The story isn't about individual capabilities. It's about what happens when someone decides that other people's lives matter more than personal safety. The message was clearly intended to inspire rather than glorify. As their interview concluded, Martinez found herself with more questions than answers about the woman who had become a legend. Alex's personal story explained some of her motivations, but the scope of her capabilities and activities remained largely mysterious. The official investigations had been abandoned after months of fruitless searching, leaving Ghost Actual's current status and location unknown. One final question, Martinez said as Alex prepared to leave. If soldiers in crisis situations call for help, will Ghost Actual answer? The question addressed what military personnel around the world were wondering about their mysterious guardian angel. Alex stood and shouldered a small backpack that could have contained anything from hiking gear to specialized equipment. Someone will always be listening, she replied with the kind of quiet confidence that had characterized all her communications with desperate soldiers. When good people need help and no one else can reach them, help will find a way. The promise was both comforting and mysterious. As Alex walked away from the coffee shop and disappeared into the crowd of ordinary people going about their daily lives, Martinez realized that she had encountered something unprecedented in modern military history. The woman who had become known as Ghost Actual represented a new kind of warrior, someone who operated outside traditional structures, but according to timeless principles of service and sacrifice. 6 months later, Martinez's article about Ghost Actual was published in a major magazine, sparking worldwide interest in the mysterious figure who had saved so many lives through extraordinary courage and skill. The story inspired countless discussions about individual responsibility, the nature of heroism, and the possibilities that exist when someone refuses to abandon those in need. But Alex Thompson had already disappeared back into anonymity, continuing her mission in ways that would remain invisible to official investigation. Around the world, soldiers facing impossible odds would continue to receive help from unexpected sources, never knowing that their salvation came from someone who had decided that other people's lives were worth any risk. The legend of Ghost Actual grew with each story of miraculous intervention, but the person behind the legend remained committed to the principle that had guided her from the beginning. Some things matter more than personal recognition, and the most important victories are measured in lives saved rather than glory earned.